I know the title brought you here. You probably thought, let's give it a chance, but it's probably clickbait. I promise you it's not clickbait, but it is a paradox. I want to make a case for mysticism, and I have evidence for it. But the evidence is that there is no and can never be any evidence for it. I know that sounds twisted, but stick with me, and by the end of this video, I think you will see what I'm saying. Let's start with a quote by Canadian philosopher Marshall McLuhan. You know him, the medium is the message guy. He also said this: I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't believed in it. Why would an intelligent person say that? Isn't the classic scientific formula, I have to see it in order to believe it? Don't we all agree that evidence, not belief, is the best tool to find the truth? McLuhan seems to be making a mockery of our entire intellectual tradition. But this brings us to the problem. The problem isn't the truth, though. The problem is the very concept of evidence. In our highly visual culture, evidence is synonymous with what is seen. We say, open your eyes, look at the evidence. But evidence is tricky. Etymologically, the word comes from Latin ex videre. Videre means to see, but that little x means out or away from, which makes evidence not the thing itself, but that which is pulled out of the thing to be shown. It implies that the core reality is actually hidden. Just look at your own face. Well, you can. The truth of the matter is that you have never seen your face, and you never will. You can point to a mirror or a photo and claim, that is my face, but that's just a reflection. That is just evidence of a face. The reality of your face is where you are looking from, not what you're looking at. Your face is permanently hidden from your own view. It is merely a representation, but not the presentation that you seek. This is why the Belgian surrealist René Magritte painted a pipe and wrote underneath it, Ceci n'est pas une pipe. This is not a pipe. He had to remind us that we weren't looking at a pipe, we were looking at paint on canvas. It was merely a representation. Technically, every mirror and every selfie you take should come with a disclaimer, this is not your face. And this confusion between the thing and the evidence of the thing is everywhere. Look at language. We call these shapes on the screen words, but they aren't words because real words are spoken. They are sound, and sound cannot be seen. What you see on the screen is just the visual carcass of a living sound. Martin Heidegger, for instance, distinguished between expression, what is spoken, pressed out, and impression, what is printed in, the imprint. Text is just the impression of language. It's visual evidence of a sound expressed. It is indeed quite literally an impressive evidence for it, but it's not it. Think about the times when we write, I hear you, or say, I see what you mean. These are oxymorons that we use constantly, because how can you see a meaning expressed through sound? How can you hear a text message? We are mixing our senses because the evidence doesn't quite add up to the reality. If I write the word this on the screen, it is merely a visual evidence for this, the thing I'm saying right now. It is a representation. A written sentence saying these are not words would be correct because indeed written words or characters are not words. Just as an image of a pipe is not the pipe, and just as your image of your face in the mirror is not your face. All these are merely evidence, and I say merely intentionally. But what does it all have to do with mysticism, you might ask? Everything. Mysticism is not about magic or crystal balls. It's about the discipline of looking past the visual evidence. The word comes from Greek mystikos, and initiate, and the root is myein, which literally means to shut or to close. The ancient mystics were visionaries who understood that to find the reality, you have to shut your eyes. You have to ignore the evidence to find the truth. And before you think this is unscientific and unserious, let's turn to the ultimate mystic, the mathematician. Mathematics, the gold standard of logic, is actually resting on a mystical foundation. In the 20th century, the logician Kurt Gödel shook the foundations of science with his incompleteness theorems. He essentially took the ancient liar's paradox, the phrase, this statement is false, and translated it into arithmetic. Let's look at the phrase itself. This statement is false. There is clear visual written evidence of the sentence. It's right there. If you only trust the visual evidence, the impression, then the statement is indeed false. But the expression itself must be true then. If the statement which says it is false is indeed false, as it says, that makes it a true statement. So we have a case here where the impression does not agree with the expression. The visual evidence is completely at odds with what is hidden behind it. Gödel proved that in any logical system there are truths that cannot be proven by the system's own evidence. He showed that the truth is larger than proof. He used logic to prove the limits of logic. In a way, he had to close his eyes to the formal rules to see the structural truth hidden behind them. This actually goes back to the very first mathematician, Pythagoras. Legend has it that Pythagoras taught his students from behind a veil. He physically hid himself because he didn't want his students to be distracted by his visual appearance, by the evidence of the teacher. He wanted them to focus purely on the truth of his words. These students were called the akousmatikoi, the listeners, from akousis meaning sound. They had to listen in the dark, and only after they passed this initiation, after they learned to see without eyes, were they allowed behind the veil. Then and only then did they become the mathematikoi, the mathematicians, the scientists, the serious people with evidence. So historically, you cannot be a mathematician until you have first been a mystic. And it makes sense. Look at this number. That symbol is 3. But have you ever seen a 3 in the wild? We've seen 3 apples, 3 cars, 3 atoms. But no one has ever seen 3ness anywhere. Because numbers do not exist in the physical world, they're abstract invisible entities called themes, from which we get the concept of mathematics. In order to see number 3 written on a page or on a blackboard, you have to believe that the theme is true. You have to be a mystic with your eyes closed in order to accept the theme before its visual evidence. Numbers acquire their visual evidence when we write them down. And notice even the English expression here, to write it down. It sort of downplays the importance of visual evidence, almost saying that what is written down is not the whole story of evidence. Which brings us back to McLuhan's phrase, "I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't believed in it." That is a mystical statement, a statement that is based not on sight, but on insight. So yes, I have no evidence for mysticism, and that is exactly the evidence I wanted to show you. And I hope now you see what I'm saying.